All right, class. First off, as always, good day. I'm glad you're here. Today, we're going to be looking at the first part of the executive branch, which, as you can see from this emblem, is about the president. Okay. So, we're going to be looking at the basics at first, and the second part, we're going to be going a little bit more in depth on like the requirements and things like that. Okay. So, let's go ahead and get started with your warm up. Oh, before I forget, your objective, we're going to analyze the importance and the amount of positions that are created for the executive branch because a lot of people just think it's the president and that's it. No, there's a lot more. And like I said, in part two, we're going to examine the requirements to become president and things like that. Okay. So here's your warm up picture. Um, the one and only warm up question asks you, what do you think this artist is trying to say about the executive branch? Okay. Now, if you have personal experience in using a chainsaw, you have a good idea about how hard it is to maintain it with one hand. You know, um, you have that firsthand experience. Okay. So you can answer this question a little bit easier than other people. But for those of you guys who haven't experienced that, uh, you have to remember this chainsaw, it's a very powerful machine. And look at the branches. It's only with one hand, two hand. That should tell you something, okay? All right. So go ahead, write your response. Pause the video because we're moving on in three, two, one. All right. So just like we mentioned before, the executive branch is one of three branches. So just a little recall, if you remember, there's the executive, legislative, and judicial. Okay. Now, what is the purpose of the president? Well, here's the thing its main purpose is to carry out and execute the laws of the land. Okay. Now, at the very beginning, George Washington was asked, like, well, what do we call you? Do we call you your highness? Do we call you your excellency? And he's just like, call me Mr. President. And that's still a term used to this very day. So if you ever run into Obama, uh, or any other president, even our current president, President Biden, you would call him Mr. President. Or if you don't want to go with that, you could just simply call him Chief. And you are still within the frameworks of like being respectful and addressing the president correctly. Okay. So what else is in the executive branch besides the president? Well, you guys know about the vice president. Sure, we all do. But what other parts are there in there? Well, if you look at this little chart right here, there's several departments, Secretary of State, Secretary of Treasury, Secretary of Defense, Attorney General. This person's a top lawyer in our country. Um, and the list goes on and on and on. Each department has their own um, jobs they have to do, and inform the president about what's going on in our country pertaining to that particular subject. And in each one of those categories that you see there are, bunch of different agencies, boards, commissions, committees. So within each group, there's basically another bunch of little groups in there, and they just branch off. So the executive branch is quite big. It really, really is. Okay, so there are 15 um, cabinet positions in total, and each one of them has their own little divisions inside of them. All right, so Article 2, Section 1 of the Constitution states the executive powers shall be vested in the President of the United States of America. The President not only heads the executive branch, but he's also the uh, the head of state and commander in chief. Now, what are those things? Basically, the head of state is basically the face of the nation. This person's supposed to be representing us to the world. That's why some people either people around the world either like our president or don't like him because again they represent us and they're kind of like this person is representing America. Ooh, that's They made a wrong choice. Or some people are like, wow, that president's, very intelligent, well spoken, knows what they're talking about, is very knowledgeable, and that's a good representation of us, you know. So again, they are the poster child of America in a sense. The other one is Commander in Chief. Now, if you look at it, it says Commander in Chief of the Armed Forces. Why was it worded that way? Because remember, back in the 1880s, 1890s, we only had an army. We were barely starting a navy. So they're like, well, the framers were like, well, we don't know what else is going to be created, so let's just call it armed forces. Anything dealing with the military. And now we have Air Force, Coast Guards. We got even the out in space. You know, so yeah, the president is in charge of any military decisions. Okay. Now, here's a little fun fact. Originally, the framers debated on having one president. Some were like, we need two presidents. Well, then what happens if there's a tie? What if one decides this and one decides that? Well, then we should have three presidents. Well, then why not have five or seven? So it's like, yeah, let's just stick with one. A strong national leader was favored by several people, especially the Federalists. They felt the president needs some oomph. If his job is to make sure that people in our country are following the law, following the rules, he needs to have some teeth. He needs to have some power to enforce those laws, and if people don't follow it, to punish them. He needs that power. But then there were some people who said, what? No, 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 no. The president should not be all powerful. The president should, be less powerful than Congress. Congress is the voice of the people. It should be Congress than the president. So people like anti-federalists, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, future presidents, wink, wink, they favored that the presidency should be weak and limited. Okay. And actually, when Thomas Jefferson runs for president, he actually says, I'm going to make the president weaker. And he actually makes it stronger. He does the opposite of what he said he's going to do. Now, here's a little fun fact. This is something, like, again, because of the times we live in, a lot of people don't know the history. Um, Basically, every president up to FDR, from Washington up to FDR, um, went broke. From um, uh, Washington to Hoover, a lot of those presidents went broke because if they wanted a secretary, they had to hire one from their own. They had to hire one with their own money. They needed somebody to do this particular job. They had to hire them. It had to come out of their pocket. So if they're like, I need um, this type of secretary, I need this person to manage the economy, help management. You had to hire that person out of their own pocket. So the EOP, the Executive Office of the President, was created in 1939 to help President FDR, Franklin D. Roosevelt, because it's like, well, these are things that the president does need. Back when the framers created, wrote the Constitution, I don't think they ever thought we would ever have this much land, this much people, this much stuff going on. They probably didn't think we'd be connected to the world as we are now. So, like, yeah, the president needs this stuff. So, chief of staff, the Office of Management and Budget, people who check to see if we're still within the means of our money. Do we need to borrow money? Things like that. Um, the National Security Council. Hey, how's our country doing? Is it safe? Or are possible threats coming to us? Uh, White House Communications and the press secretary. People who handle the press, because the president can't stop and talk to the press every day for an hour or 2 hours. You can't do that. So they had to hire someone to do that. All right. So your question at the very, very end: do you think the executive office, the president's office, should be powerful, medium, or weak? Okay, so do you agree with like Alexander Hamilton that it should be strong? Do you think no, it should be somewhere in between, or do you think it should be like how Jefferson and Madison said it should be weak? So the writing prompts on the bottom. I believe the power of the executive branch should be fill it in, whichever one you believe, and because be sure to explain. Okay. So once you're done with that, you guys are done with this lesson. So hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Um, Let me double check something really quickly. Yeah, sorry about that. Just wanted to double check if there was two questions or one. So this is it. All right. So again, one of the big things that a lot of students forgot to do last grading period was put their name on their paper. So please, please, please double check that your name is on there and that you have the correct period. Um, second period, Monday, Wednesday, um, third period, Tuesday, Thursday, or whichever, you know, just be sure you get the period and the day right, along with your name on that. Okay. So with that being said, guys, hopefully you learned something new. Hopefully you enjoyed this. I'll see you guys later. Okay. Take care. Be safe.